This is Alabama Politics with Steve Flowers, an in-depth interview with Alabama's top political newsmakers. Now, from the studios of Troy University, here is Steve Flowers.
I'm Steve Flowers, and welcome to Alabama Politics. Folks, we have a great opportunity tonight to see our senior U.S. Senator Richard Shelby, who's in the state campaigning for re-election. Senator Shelby is, in my opinion, one of the greatest senators Alabama's ever had. He's in my book, Goats and Governors, in my columns, in 65 papers throughout the state. I've written numerous times that as a political historian, I think we've had three of the greatest senators in my lifetime. I think Lister Hill and John Sparkman would be two of them, but Senator Richard Shelby will go down in history as one of our greatest senators in history. He's an icon. He's been in the United States Senate for 30 years, folks. Prior to that, he served 8 years in the United States Congress from the old 7th District. And prior to that, he served 8 years in the state Senate in 1970 to 1978. I've had the opportunity to know Senator Shelby all that time. Matter of fact, I was a freshman at the University of Alabama in 1970 during that epic Wallace-Brewer race for governor, and you ran for the state Senate. You never took an easy route. You beat an incumbent that year, a Zena. Some guy Zena was the incumbent senator, wasn't he, in 1970?
He was a strong contender.
Who was it? Was an incumbent, wasn't
he didn't run.
Okay,
he
did
not run.
So it was an open seat.
Skidmore was.
Skidmore, yeah.
Yeah, he was. But it was a tough, good race. It was a good race for a young man.
You had a great campaign that year. It's unusual you could find a billboard because Wallace and Brewer had all the billboards. You remember that race, how they were?
Yeah, we tried to buy some and they were all gone. And I said, well, aren't you going to sell a few to us? And they said, we're not going to sell them to you, but we'll rent them to you.
You know, Brewer had what I thought was probably one of the best ads I've ever seen. You know, Wallace had been out of state campaigning for president repeatedly. And people knew he was doing that and really wasn't governing the state. And Brewer had what I thought was one of the best ads, Alabama needs a full-time governor. And he'd bought every rural billboard. You remember that? And that's why you had a hard time getting billboards. And he led Brewer at Wallace in that race, and Wallace played the race card and beat him in the runoff, you know.
That was a tough race. I think Governor Wallace beat Governor Brewer in the runoff, as you say, by not by a big margin either.
Beat him up in Tennessee Valley. He spent all his time up in northeast Alabama, around Scottsboro up there.
A lot of people live up there.
They sure do. People don't realize that about the state. That I love our area of the state, down here in the Wiregrass and around Montgomery, because I'm from here and born and raised here. But that area of the state, if you had to pick a pretty part of the state, around Scottsboro and DeKalb and Jackson, I hope when you visit all the counties throughout the state, you visit that area in the fall of the year, because that fall foliage up there is just absolutely
Well, it looks like the eastern part of the U.S. when the foliage comes in October, the mountains and so forth. You're absolutely right. But you know, all the state's pretty. I visited, as you mentioned, every county in the state. It's just different. It's diverse.
That's one of the things I really admire about your tenure in the United States Senate. His entire 30 years, folks, he has visited every county in Alabama, all 67 counties, every year, held a town hall meeting. And if y'all are watching his television ads, I think it's very interesting. They show country roads where there's potholes sometimes, and he knows every route. I don't know who drives you sometimes, but
I drive myself a lot.
Do you? You drive a lot from, but that's, you probably know shortcuts. Let's get from Arab to Gunnersville this way or something like that.
I know shortcuts, but shortcuts don't matter if the traffic's tough in front of you.
You don't hold many town meetings out on 280 in Birmingham, do you?
Well, we've been there many times. It's a congested area, but that is a great county and good area and a growth area for the state.
Back to what we were talking about, people don't realize this, that 2/3 of the people in the state are north of Birmingham, Birmingham North. That's where the votes are.
But only about 1/3 of the land.
Exactly.
Because Alabama, the way it's shaped geographically, it's wider and bigger in the south from Mobile, say to Dothan, then it tapers off, and then it gets in North Alabama about close to 2/3 of the people live.
Yeah, you know, and it shows up in the circulation of my papers I'm in. If a town like Scottsboro may be the same size as a town like Enterprise, but there's twice as many people in Jackson County as there is Coffee, even though Coffee's a growing populous county. as your assistant Katie Boyd knows, about her hometown. But that's the interesting thing. The circulation, those papers would be twice as big as other papers.
But at the end of the day, we're all Alabamians.
And they all
Whether
love
we're
you.
from Mobile or Dothan or Enterprise or Montgomery or Troy or Scottsboro, Huntsville, Birmingham, you name it, even Tuscaloosa or Auburn. We're all Alabamians.
Speaking of Huntsville, you've done a lot for every part of the state. You brought home a lot of money from Washington to the state. But people are not aware, I don't think, of how instrumental you have been in helping the NASA thing in Huntsville. Huntsville is probably the jewel of this state as far as you take that area, and it's got the highest per capita income and the highest number of PhDs of any city its size. It's like, I shouldn't say this, it's like it doesn't really belong in Alabama. It's like a part of the research triangle of North Carolina,
or Silicon
Valley of California is just transplanted in the Tennessee Valley.
Well, we're fortunate to have that.
Well, we are, but we're also fortunate to have you have protected that. Now, you got to give the original credit when you were a little boy to John Sparkman. They ought to name that city Sparkmanville.
And also Dr. von Braun. And the German rocket
Well, they
team.
brought them all.
Absolutely.
But Sparkman was able to get that started, but you have done a yeoman's job.
Thank you.
And I don't know if the rest of people in the state realize how important your committee assignments have been. Going back to that, seniority equates into power in Washington, and Senator Shelby is probably easily one of the 10 most powerful men in the United States Senate at this time, and that's conservative, probably closer to 5, being in the majority party and the Republican Party, and he chairs major committees. You chaired intelligence at one time.
I did. I had the opportunity about 20 years ago. I was on it and chaired it for about 5 years, and I've been fortunate to been reelected and be up there. This is the 3rd time I've chaired the Banking Committee, which is a very important committee, and I'm doing it currently. And then I've been on the Appropriations Committee a long time, and that's the one everybody wants to chair.
It sure is. You've done a great job on those committees. Originally, what all committees have you been on in the Senate during the 30 years? Your original term, starting in '86, you went on some of the best.
I was on the Armed Services Committee.
And banking, those two.
Banking always.
Always banking.
And energy. I was on those committees. Of course, I'm on the Rules Committee, which is kind of an in-house committee, sets the rules and do a lot of things in the Senate.
You've been on banking the entire time.
29 years. I've chaired it 3 times.
Yeah, and you're currently chairman.
Chairing it now.
Senator Sparkman chaired banking.
He did. Sparkman chaired it.
Senator Hill and Sparkman were he was a labor and relations or something.
Senator Hill was a senior member. He was not chairman, but he was a senior member and very influential on the Appropriations Committee for years and years. And when Senator Hill retired in 1968, there was a gap there from 1968 till 1995. Alabama had no representation on the Appropriation Committee. No senator from Alabama has served on the Appropriation Committee successively other than Senator Hill and when I went on in 95 in Alabama.
You've been on appropriations since 95? That's 20 years now.
20 years, 21 years.
On appropriations. Well, I tell you what, talking about that, you've done a really, really good job also, not just of visiting the counties, but your staff's done a good job of responding to constituent letters and that sort of thing. But when I was a boy, I wrote Sparkman and Hill handwritten letters, and they wrote me back. Back in that era when they didn't have the staff to do that, but you've done a good job of staying in touch with everybody. You've kept the common touch, even though you've risen to fame and power in the United States Senate and I'm just really, really thankful as an Alabamian you're running for another term.
Thank you.
You're going to stay up there.
Well, that's up to the people. Somebody was talking about term limits the other day. We have them every 6 years. We face the voters, and the congressmen, they face it every 2 years, and that's in our Constitution. And if you were there 1 term or 2 terms, you would not be recognized probably. About the 3rd or 4th term, then you happen to grow a little stature and a little power in the Senate and the House too.
Well, like I said, seniority equates into power in Washington, and you were on a powerful route as a young man in the United States House. You had 8 years in the United States House. Your law partner Walter Flowers was there prior to you, and then He was after you. Before he was before you, wasn't he?
He was before me, and then he ran for the Senate. He and Heflin
In
ran it
78,
off
yeah.
in '78. Remember that?
Senator, now you've only had Senator Heflin serve with you, and then Jeff Sessions. Has anybody else besides those two served with you?
That's it.
That's it.
Senator Heflin served 3 terms. 18 years in the Senate.
He went in '78,
and
he stayed.
He went to the Senate when I went to the House.
That's right.
And then Senator Sessions has been there since '96.
Yeah, he's getting some seniority now.
Yeah, he has. He's doing very well. He's a senior member of the Judiciary Committee. He chairs the Subcommittee on Immigration, where he has become really an expert in the area of immigration, and is well-spoken and well-versed, and we respect him. I work with him hand in glove.
I knew y'all had y'all have very similar voting records. We have a very conservative delegation.
We have a good working relationship.
I knew you did. You had a good relationship with Heflin, but you've got maybe even better one with Sessions. I think Sessions looks up to you.
Well, I respect Senator Sessions. Sessions he was a former U.S. attorney. He's very involved in the Judiciary Committee, a committee I don't serve on, but we're interested in it. He's on the Armed Services Committee, which complements what I do on the Defense Appropriations Committee. They authorize. They're the legislative committee, and we're the funding committee. So we're both working together, trying to make sure that Alabama plays its proper role, a real role in national security. We got Huntsville, we got Fort Rucker, we got Maxwell here, we got the Anniston Army Depot. All of this is important. And then we've got huge shipbuilding for the Navy going on in Mobile with Austell. We got a lot going and working together. We work together with our House delegation too.
That ad that's running on television does a good job of picking up different parts of the state.
Oh yeah.
It has part of Mobile and Baldwin County that leaves, and
you can tell.
Yeah, you can tell if you know
Tennessee
the state.
Valley.
Got the Tennessee Valley. You can tell. Where are you hunting? Where is that done?
Well, that was in Greene County.
Next door to
It's over in West Alabama. It's the Chambers family farm there. They do a lot of quail hunting. I've shot with them a lot, and they. I would like to have spent the day there shooting birds, but my film crew wouldn't let me do that.
You know, a lot of folks will sometimes have media people depict them being hunters, but you truly are. And
I used to be.
You still do sometimes. You get back to the state and hunt birds, but I've had people say I went hunting with Shelby.
Yeah, a lot of folks.
So they'll say, well, I'm envious. I wish I could spend that kind of time with him. You and I get to visit sometimes.
We used to do a lot of that. We used to do duck hunting and geese. We'd hunt geese. We'd hunt quail. We'd hunt pheasants. We'd hunt anything that moved. I like the birds, and anywhere and everywhere. And I can't do it as much as I used to, but I like it. I have a few guns. I think that we have a right to bear arms.
Talk about that some. About this. What's about Obama's initiative he's just come out with? As chairman, as ranking member on the appropriations, and chairman of banking, and as one of the top 5 senators in America, can y'all thwart that some way or other? Legislatively, that he's really circumvented the law and circumvented Congress.
I think it's a grab for power. The president he got to realize he's the president of the United States. He's not a king. I've said yesterday, and I said, I would suggest to the president that the Second Amendment of the Constitution is not a suggestion. It's the law. The people have a right to bear arms. We have over 300 million guns in this country. Most of the people I know with a lot of guns respect guns. They're not criminals. They're not terrorists. They're this. We're always going to have some bad folks. But out of 300 million, we're going to punish everybody else. I say this is a power grab. We're going to fight it. I'm the chairman right now of the Appropriations Subcommittee over the Justice Department. We're going to have hearings on this. I'm going to bring up the Attorney General and others, and also bring up the First Amendment advocates. We're going to point out that this is a power grab. And the president's got to know that the courts, if not the House and Senate, will throw that out. We'll win that battle.
Senator, talking about the Armed Services Committee, which you've served on, and being on appropriations and the committees you've served on, and how much you've done for Huntsville, do you know, if you look at the state, and you know this better than anybody in the whole state because you've been there on the front line fighting for them, but if you go throughout the state, you mentioned that, if you take the Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville, you take here in Montgomery, Maxwell Gunner, you take the Wiregrass with Rucker, and each of those three things, they are not only the leading, they are the dominant employer. And there's a lot of military stuff in Mobile, as you know. But you know, you think about it, I had Todd Strains, the mayor of Montgomery, sitting where you are about a year ago, and it was one of the cutbacks in state government. And I said, Todd, I guess all that cutback in state government has hurt your city. Assuming, I said, I guess with it being the biggest employer. He says, no, the state of Alabama is not Montgomery's biggest employer. I said, has Hyundai gotten bigger than them? They said, no, it's Maxwell Gunner. And a lot of those folks retire here.
Absolutely.
So you've got a lot of well-paid, well-educated, retired military people in Huntsville, especially. They like the state. And Fort Rucker's same way.
I think you have to start with the basic premise of what is in the national security's interest. What role does Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville? What role does Fort Rucker play? What role does the Air University in Maxwell Gunner play? What role does the Anniston Army Ordnance Depot? What role will the Austell Shipbuilding in Mobile play in our Navy? And we have to sell that, market that in the Washington, D.C., not just because it happens in Alabama, but because it's important for our security. We're pleased and we're proud of what they do in all these places. But you're absolutely right. It has an economic impact.
Tremendous.
You know, you take Fort Rucker in the Wiregrass. It has an economic impact for not one county or two counties, but the whole area, larger than any one thing in the area. Maxwell Gunner in Montgomery is integral. You know, it's the Air University, it's the War College. And then what the role that Gunner plays annexed there. And then you go to Huntsville, it fuels economically most of North Alabama and half of Tennessee. But it has to play that role in national security. And we're making sure that it does this. Then look at NASA. Marshall is the propulsion center for NASA. I've been fortunate to be chairman of the subcommittee that funds NASA. I want to make sure that NASA is on the cutting edge. Does it inure to our people? It does, but it inures to the nation's benefit. Mm-hmm.
It has to be. You've been an integral part of that too, the entire 30 years. At the end of this term is 6 years. Will you have the longest longevity of any United States Senator in Alabama history? I think you will. What would Hill and Sparkman, how long?
Sparkman was here 32 years and 2 months, and Hill was here 30 years and maybe a month.
So you, at this time next year, you'll surpass.
Well,
Sparkman has 32 years.
32 years.
He went to the Senate in 48 in a special election, didn't he?
46.
46, that's right.
And then he served till end of 68.
And Bob Jones went to that congressional seat.
Bob won the congressional seat. He vacated in that a special election in 46.
Yeah.
That goes back a long time. But I think it's not, seniority is important. Tenure is important. But I think what's important is what you do when you're there, your ability to do things, your courage to do things, your resolve. And because you could have an empty suit up there sitting in a chair.
Right.
We have a few of those. But I want to be there because I think I can make a difference.
And
I have made a difference.
You have made a
and
difference.
I believe that I've got some good years ahead of me. It's up to the people of Alabama, and I'm working hard to hope they'll send me back March the 1st.
You know, the reason you have been so effective and been such a great senator is you enjoy it. You know, I go back, I've written this about George Wallace and Bear Bryant, that we lived during that time, you know, to see Bear Bryant and George Wallace close and personal. But the reason they were geniuses, they had the talent for it, but they loved it. George Wallace loved politics. Now, you like diplomacy and getting things done. Wallace just liked running. He just liked to run.
I think you got to do some of both.
Mm-hmm.
I like to come home. Like I'm spending a lot of time, all this week we're out, all over Alabama. I like to visit each county. I like to have access to people, but for them to have access to me. That's part of it. And then once you get to Washington, you got to translate all that into action. And you're one of 100 people, so you got to work your way into the situation. You served in the legislature. You know, you're not the dictator there.
No, you got to work with people. You got to get along with people.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of that, let me ask you this question. Think back over the last 30 years. Who've been some of your favorite friends in the Senate? Were you good friends with old Fred Thompson that died last year?
Yeah, Fred and I were friends.
He was a good senator, wasn't he?
He was a good.
Didn't stay but 8 years.
He was a man of multi-talents. He was a good lawyer.
Yeah.
If you go back, he was a young lawyer. He was the one that came up for Senator Baker with the term to ask the question, what did you know and when did you know it?
Yeah.
That was Fred Thompson. He was a young counsel to Baker then. But he was an actor, he was a lawyer, he was a good senator. He would have made, and he was at one time, he would have made a tremendous, had a tremendous career just as a lawyer.
You know,
he died too young.
He died too young. I had leukemia, lymphoma, I think.
That's what it was.
Yeah. Anyway, back to him. Tell you what. I've been fairly good at predicting Alabama races over the years. I've written about it for close to 2 decades now, but I'm not too good at presidential. For example, 8 years ago, I wrote this glowing column that Fred Thompson was going to be the Republican nominee because he had this gravelly voice.
Good presence.
The presence, total. You know, great Law and Order, movie star, TV star, and everything. And I said, he's going to be the Republican nominee, and he's going to be president in my column. Even his wife called me from Nashville and thanked me for that column because they'd read it on their campaign stuff or something. He dropped out a week later.
Well, you never know. You know, the political arena running for president is a big thing. To run statewide in a state like Alabama, but imagine what it'd be in California or Texas or something like that, and the expense of it. But to run for president is an awesome task.
Speaking of some of those senators, I was asking about the question about the ones you enjoyed being buddies with. You and old Cochran from Mississippi, pretty good friend. You your best friend's that guy from Tennessee now.
Lamar?
No, your friends with Lamar Alexander, but
Bob Corker.
The Bob Corker. You and Corker are good
we're
friends.
good friends, and we get along. We serve on the banking committee together.
Yeah.
He's quite a character.
Yeah, you like him.
Like him, can't help but like him.
Senator, let me ask you, when some of those senators arrived with such ambition to be president, like Cruz and Rubio now, did you figure they were going to run for president eventually? They ain't served but one term, have they? Both of them one-termers?
Cruz and
Rubio
in their first time. Obama was in his first term.
Did you figure
Kennedy wasn't there long?
No, did you figure when they got there they had ambition?
Well, you could tell.
You could tell.
You could tell.
They wanted to go to the microphone right away.
Well, if not the microphone, the TV.
Yeah.
You know, and you could tell they weren't planning to stay in the Senate.
Did you figure that on Cruz and Rubio? You could figure them out.
Well, they're both ambitious. They both have talent too. Cruz is very smart, very determined. Rubio is smart, charismatic. I believe, and I don't know this, you know, the race is going to have to crystallize around the middle of March or wherever. And if the trends at the moment, and they change, I believe it's going to come down to Trump, Cruz, and Rubio.
I think so too.
And then it'll come down to 2.
Yeah.
And ultimately to 1. So what'll happen, gosh, I don't know.
Be interesting to watch. Did you get along with old Senator Burr from West Virginia pretty well?
I did. I'd struggled with him sometime when I first went up there.
He was right with people, wasn't he?
He told Senator Heflin that, and I was coming from the House to the Senate, and I wanted to be on the Appropriations Committee, and he didn't want me on there. He said that Shelby was a nice young man, but he had definite Republican tendencies.
Is that what he said?
Yeah, at that time.
He was a real Democrat, yeah.
Yeah, he was right, though. But I enjoyed Senator Byrd. Byrd was a self-made man. He's smart. And I worked with him, served with him on the Appropriations Committee. But Senator Dole was somebody that I got to know and respected so much.
Y'all were good friends.
Oh yeah, he paved the way for a lot of openings for me.
I know you're modest, but sometimes if you're in Washington riding that train, do you have tourists, with you being one of the 10 most powerful men in America, do you have them ask for your autograph sometimes, to stop you and ask
Oh
you?
yeah, but I'll blush and embarrass, you know.
Do you sign their autograph?
People like that, but you know, nothing like somebody running for president.
No.
But it's a good thing.
You know, you have had a conservative voting record your entire time, even when you were, when all of us ran as Democrats. Even though we may have been Republicans, we still ran as Democrats, a lot of people did, you know, back during that time. You had a very, very conservative voting record in the United States House.
I know.
You know, some of the Democratic leaders would always say Shelby's really a Republican.
Well, Reagan was trying to recruit me from day one.
Yeah.
I remember the time I've been in the House 2 years, and the president came in. It was about a month or two after the assassination attempt. He was so popular, and I got a call one day and invited me to breakfast. I thought it was some of my friends from the University of Alabama playing jokes on me. And I got Ann to call down there, and I said, call down there and see. I wasn't going to show up down there without knowing. They said, no, the president's invited you to breakfast. Just him, George Bush, and Jim Baker, who was his chief of staff. And I walked in there, and I thought, my gosh, I'd been there 2 years. And Reagan was so charming. He said, look, he said, Congressman, he said, you vote with us more than most of the Republicans. He said, I was a Democrat for nearly 50 years till they raised taxes to 90%. I left the party. They left me. Said, we got a place for you. We want you in the Republican Party.
This was in 1980.
81.
81, yeah.
And this was President Reagan. He was saying, and I told him I was going to try to work and try to make the Democratic Party responsible. You know, like he told me he wished me a lot of luck. He said, you'll join us someday.
Yeah.
And I did.
Yeah. About 90, wasn't it?
Yeah, 96,
94.
94,
yeah.
But I'm basically who I was. You know.
Well, and too, you've got a great voting record to defund Planned Parenthood.
Oh gosh, you know, you got to. You know, we spend so many things out there. I got involved in the first big anti-abortion effort I got involved in was the partial birth abortion. And a lot of people from Mobile, Huntsville, Birmingham, a lot of the churches, Catholic, Protestant, evangelical, they knew me, they wanted to meet with me. And they said, we want you to get involved with us on pro-life. And they showed me films of partial birth abortion, and that's repulsive. And I got involved. We passed and limited some of that, and I've been with them, and I've worked with them. I believe in that, but Planned Parenthood, I voted to defund them.
I knew you had. Christian Coalition of America's give you 100% voting record. NRA, 100%. So you've carried the conservative banner for Alabama.
Well, I want to carry it again. I hope I'll be able to. That'll be up to the people of Alabama. I hope that they will trust me again.
I think they will, and our time's up, Senator. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us on Alabama politics, and we appreciate very much you running for a 6th term for the United States Senate, and 6 years from now you'll have the record.
Well, thank you.
For history of Alabama for senator seniority in the United States Senate. But again, folks, our guest tonight has been our iconic United States Senior Senator Richard Shelby, who is from Tuscaloosa, but everybody in the state knows him. He's been to all 67 counties his entire 30 years in the United States Senate, and we thank him for taking time to be on our show. And we thank you viewers for watching Alabama Politics. He'll be on the ballot March 1st. Folks, our election is right around the corner. Thank you again.
Thank you,
Senator.
Steve. Thank you, Steve.
Appreciate you. Bye.
This has been Alabama Politics with Steve Flowers, a production of Troy University Television. Opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of Troy University, its administration, faculty, staff, or students.